Hello, welcome to IC Show TV. This is Paul Milligan at IC 2019. Thank you for joining us for the latest in our series of panel discussions. Today we're looking at voice control. You'll have all seen Alexa, so it's probably an apt time to get stuck into this. So joining me today, next to me is Andrew Upshorn from distributors Maverick AV Solutions, and there is Patrick Murray from Catch Technologies. You describe yourself as a technology management software provider, is that right, Patrick?
Correct.
Fantastic. Yes. Okay, so first question, we've all seen or heard the rise of Alexa. I'm sure my kids are obsessed with it. Do we think that's going to move into the sort of, that type of situation is going to move into the corporate kind of pro world? Andrew, do you see that having?
Look, from what I've heard from the channel, and we speak to a lot of channel partners, there's definitely a real interest in it.
Yeah.
The people are starting to ask questions and understand it. I think what's interesting is that it's come from the consumer side of the world, where you've got things like Alexa and Google Home and Apple's device in the home, and that's given rise to the whole category. It's almost legitimized the category.
Yeah.
Now people are going, where does it go next? So absolutely, we're starting to hear questions about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Patrick, do you see a day when voice will take over from touch as the sort of default option for controlling electronics?
I don't. I think it's an extension and it's another option. And when you really look at this space, what you start to see is that there's a certain type of demographic or personality or use case where voice is really preferable. But at the same time, if it's a public space and you have different types of people in there, there will be people who prefer to use the touch panel. And they tend to be more technical people, visual oriented, and guess who's designing our systems?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we have that bias towards visual touch panel GUI interfaces where there's a whole segment of the population, once they start using voice control, they never want to see a touch panel again.
Yeah.
And I think also you'll find that there's a sense of, if you look at current technology and the way that you interact and collaborate with technology at the moment, yes, there's touch, okay, but there's a whole portion of the population who aren't there yet. They don't want to touch, so they might have a touch screen in a meeting space, but they're not using it as that. They're just using it as a display. In the same way that when voice comes about, there will be a degree of reservation towards that. So some will adopt it, and other people will go, well, I might go to the touch rather than the voice.
I mean, you mentioned earlier, Alexa's it's obviously a residential commercial product, should we say, rather than a sort of pro product.
That's right.
But much like the iPad kind of entered the AV world for a few years, and then people, CEOs were said to be desperate to have an iPad to control things and stuff. But all that really did in the long run was push people towards more professional devices, which is great news for the industry because that's what we provide. Do you think that Alexa and Google will have the same effect, that they will push interest in voice control, but we'll have our own much more professional, much more reliable solution down the line?
It could be. I think it's like any of these technologies. It does, you've got to have somebody who's the innovator. And then it drives it. Look at the MP3. It was developed by other companies, and then Apple got on the bandwagon. And then really legitimized the entire category and drove it mass market. And I think you may find the same thing here, where there's people that start with the category, but there are others who come in and do something better, or more dynamic.
Sure. Patrick, do you think we could see a pro voice solution down the line, or are Google and Amazon too big to defeat?
Well, I think it's possible today. I mean, Amazon even announced Alexa for Business. And when you look at how they announced that, their solution was just use an automation processor to connect to everything else. So we'll always be using our purpose-built specialty equipment, the same people with the skills you need to make a great sounding and looking conference room. The trick will be to integrate with this internet-based technology. And once we do that, it's way more than voice. It gives you the opportunity to really have an always-on connection to all of your AV systems, do monitoring control, collect data, do analytics, and eventually, ultimately, be a managed service provider.
Sure. I mean, how far down the line are we before we see those voice will be integrated into those, like room booking or heating control? Are we near there, or is that still quite some way off, do you think?
I mean, I think IoT sensors, for instance, that's a whole new category that's coming out now, walk around the show and you see a number of display panels that actually have IoT sensors on, so they can measure CO2 levels, they can measure humidity, the temperature, attendance in a room. There are other people who are doing heat mapping. So we're starting to look at a lot of different dynamics around a space. So I suppose we're on the journey. To the next part. So if they can tie that in with voice, that'd be really interesting. Yeah.
But I guess that sounds like it's almost your mission, Patrick, is to do this.
The technology is there today, and we've implemented it. Absolutely works. It can be made to be secure. Security is a team sport. Everybody needs to be involved, from the integrator to the end user and the hardware manufacturers. But these things are available today. It's more of a question of who's going to go first.
Sure.
And I think if a few high-profile projects adopt one of these technologies and everything goes well, which it can if it's properly planned, then you'll see a lot more of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then I suppose the other thing as well is then, training the channel and showing the benefit to us in the industry in terms of, where's the business for us? What's our part in this whole thing? So
whenever we've looked at voice control in the past, there's always been kind of two stumbling blocks or issues that have come up. I want to look at both of those sort of individually. First one that was always mentioned was there's a lack of standard commands when it comes to voice, because different languages, or as opposed to like a touch thing where it's up, down, on, off. And the trend for control panel seems to have got to simplify rather than have 1,000 buttons, have 3. The successor ClickShare was one button. Do we think there's sort of lack of standard voice commands could hold it back, or it could slow down adoption?
Look, I think it'd be interesting. I mean, I've got it. Well, people say I've got an accent. It depends on which country you're from. And if you're in a place where you've got people from different places, different accents, different colloquialisms, slang, jargon, whatever you call it. There's a whole bunch of dynamics. And even business talk. The way people talk in a business environment may be different from how they may talk at home. So it'd be interesting to see what sort of key triggers or real words are needed for that environment and how it's dealt with.
Sure. Patrick, lack of standards is a huge problem in the wider Pro AV world, but do you think for voice control that could be an issue?
Well, I think there's a few things to keep in mind, and one of them is, what is the application? And to your first question, it will not replace a touch panel. If you have a complicated system that has a lot of controls, you'll still need some kind of a visual element to get into those deeper functions. But you could always make that high level, turn on, turn off. Those are standardized. Start the meeting, stop the meeting. Those are things that are already available. So when you use a service like Google Voice Services or Amazon Voice Services, they've actually created that API voice model already for you, and you're taking advantage of all the AI that's behind there, and it does actually improve. I've spoken with some of my customers who've been living with this for almost a year now, and he tells me it's gotten better over time. So he's actually noticed the learning, the active learning that's taking place with his voice recognition.
The other issue that seems to be a big one with voice is privacy.
Of course.
And it was interesting. I had a conversation on the stand earlier with a UK integrator, and he was saying he won't have an Alexa in his house because it's always listening. He doesn't. This is a tech guy. This is a guy who's been in AV for 20, 30 years. So, do we think privacy could be a major issue, especially in some of your big kind of corporates? I'd imagine.
I think it's a legitimate fear in terms of the fact that. Think of the end user environments. If you're going into a bank or a government institution, etc., they're hyper aware of security. So there's probably, even if the technology can cope with that and be secure, there's a lot of work to be done to convince people that it is the right type of technology for that environment. I've got an Alexa at home, and it reacts to TV adverts. So when an Amazon advert comes on, it actually, it says, hey Alexa, or whatever it may be, it reacts to that, it listens into that. And that's just a silly example, but I'm just a consumer on the Alexa product. The person who's using it in the meeting room is just probably a consumer, so you've got to educate them first that,
Oh, so it's interesting you said that. So it's dual prong then, so we have to get the product right, secure, but also then convince the buyers that it is
secure.
I mean, Patrick, do you think privacy do you think that's the big issue around voice control?
It's the big issue that's blocking it right now. That's what the lag is. And It has a lot to do with belief, and we could look right now, there is an internet-connected microphone sitting right in front of you.
Yeah.
So there's no Alexa in the room,
Yeah.
and people tend not to realize that every single laptop, every tablet, every phone has an internet-connected microphone. So if you really believe that you don't want anybody listening, you need to lock all of your equipment outside the conference room. And there are situations where you must do that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, especially for smaller businesses, it's a lot like IT security. How secure do you want to be? And you need to analyze that on a case-by-case basis.
I suppose with that is, the industry has to answer that question clearly so that people know, so that integrators aren't putting it into the wrong environment.
Well, there's an opportunity there because we have microphones in the room.
Yeah.
We have control of the DSP. So we could absolutely guarantee that those microphones are muted.
Yeah.
And that's the other part. When you have a device from Google or Amazon or whatever it is, they have their terms and conditions, and either you trust them or you don't. And it's never sending all the time. They all say the device listens, but until you say the keyword, it does not send to the internet.
Yeah.
So there's a matter of trust there. Do you believe what they're saying or not? And of course you could analyze the network packets and actually see if they're holding up to it. So there's ways to really analyze this and be fairly certain of what's going on. But I really like the idea of us taking control of that voice channel and then just using the AI to do what it's good at. And then we can mute the microphones and be absolutely certain no audio is flowing outside.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Andrew, Patrick, many thanks for your time. Appreciate
Pleasure.
it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for joining us for this panel discussion. Click on our homepage. There's plenty more of those panel discussions from IC 2019 to enjoy. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.